Greetings, and thank you for tuning in to this first virtual pre-concert talk for the 2022 Bellingham Festival of Music. My name is Ryan Dudenbostel, and I am delighted to be back this year as the festival's program annotator and pre-concert lecturer. This summer's opening program by the Calidor Quartet features 4 works related to the theme of hunting. 3 of them, by Haydn, Mozart, and Brahms, approach the subject pretty similarly, while the 4th, a brilliant and visceral piece by Jörg Wiedmann, takes a very different approach. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But first, I thought it might be interesting to talk about the musical trope of hunting and what it is that makes hunting music sound the way it does. Now, first, it's important to keep in mind that classical, and that's classical with a capital C, classical era European instrumental music was written almost entirely for aristocratic audiences, and that the kind of hunting with which they would have related was a highly ritualized process involving a large hunting party with very specific roles for each member. And these hunts were not only social and recreational activities, but they also trained all kinds of skills that could apply on the battlefield as well in times of war. Now, all kinds of animals were hunted: wild boar, wolves, bears, rabbits, foxes. But the most popular quarry was called the hart, spelled H-A-R-T. And a hart is a male red deer. Typically, there were other animals involved as well, like horses and dogs and even falcons. And the hunting party would find their animal, they would chase it down until it could run no further, and then the leader of the group would be the one to make the kill. To keep in contact with one another in the forest, the hunters would use horns. And it's the sound of the horn, or the imitated sound of the horn, that is the first and most common trait of hunting music. Now, the horn is kind of unique. Like all the other brass instruments, the horn at its essence is a long tube that's narrow on one end and wide on the other. And you blow in one end, you buzz your lips in one end, and then the sound comes out. And because it doesn't have any keys or valves, valved horns weren't invented until well into the 19th century. It only has a limited number of notes, which we call partials. So a brief lesson in acoustics. If you have one vibration that's running the whole length of the horn, it might make this note. If you have 2 vibrations running the whole length of the horn, it will make this note. 1 octave higher or double the frequency. If you have 3 vibrations, it makes this note. If you have 4, it makes this note. 5 makes this note, and so on. And so in order to get notes that are close together like these, you have to play partials that are very close together with 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 vibrations for the length of the tube. And that's where the horn usually sits. Now, horns typically come in pairs in orchestral music, and the lower of the horn parts doesn't have access to these notes that are close together, and so it plays notes that are further apart. And you'll hear this kind of sound all the time in horn music. Where the upper horn is playing notes that are close together, and the lower horn is playing notes that are quite far apart. And we call that effect horn fifths. Only one of the intervals, this one, is a true fifth, but it's such a trope in horn writing that it doesn't just appear in horn music, it appears in all kinds of music that's trying to sound like the horn, including hunting music like this. So the number 1 trait of hunting music is this imitation of the horn. A second trait is that because the horn has so few notes available to it, the harmony is very simple. Typically tonic harmony and what we call dominant harmony. So we have the tonic, which is the main fundamental pitch of the horn, and then the dominant, which is what we call 1/5 higher. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The two most foundational harmonies in tonal music. These are the foundational harmonies that underpin most hunting music. That's the second trait. And now the third trait is that hunting music, because hunters ride horses, hunting music is in what's called a compound meter or a triple meter. You might hear it called like waltz time or 3/4 time. But what it really means is that each beat is divided into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, as opposed to 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We hear that kind of galloping sound. So together, if I was to invent some kind of fake hunting music, it would sound something like this. Either 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, the simple harmony, tonic and dominant, and then the horn fifths. So there you have the 3 traits that make hunting music sound the way it does. And you will hear these in all of the pieces on this program, including Jörg Wiedmann's Jagd Quartet or Hunting Quartet, which uses a quote from Schumann as its point of departure. This piece explores not just the experience of hunting, but also the experience of being hunted. In this case, it ends up being the cellist who is the quarry. And I'll warn you that this piece is very different than the others on the program, and you might even find it upsetting. There is yelling and screaming and percussive sounds made on the instruments that sound harsh and ugly. And that is, of course, the point. Wiedmann is allowing us to see the ritual of the hunt from both perspectives at the same time. And as disturbing as it can be, it's a masterpiece. And that brings me to my last point of this talk, which is that all art is a product of its time and acts as a device for processing and reconciling the triumphs, the challenges, and the anxieties of that particular time. Bach, for example, was writing in an era in which the processes of reason and critical examination were unseating concepts like received wisdom and an inerrant church. And his music is consequentially both devoutly religious and almost inhumanly rational. Similarly, at the turn of the 19th century, we saw the crumbling of the old aristocratic feudal social order that had been in place for 1,000 years. And at the same time, new technology and industrialization were changing everyday life literally overnight. This is the era of Beethoven, and his music is a clear reflection of both the optimism and the anxiety that was hanging in the air. Now think about our time. This is the era of the internet, of the atomic bomb, space travel, international terrorism, genetic engineering. As Paul Simon famously said, these are the days of miracle and wonder. And never has life been so exciting or so scary. And the music of our time reflects this. Sometimes it's easy on the ears, and other times it's not. But it is authentically ours. And in at least some small way, it helps us get some perspective on the world around us. So please give it a chance. And if you decide you really can't stand it, well, at least the Brahms comes afterwards on the program. Okay, I'll come off the soapbox now. And thank you so much for tuning in to this little talk. I hope you enjoy this fantastic program by the brilliant Calidor Quartet. I will be here via video for all the programs this season and look forward to talking to you about music again next time.